Games: Catching Fire is the second film in the Hunger Games franchise, and it is my favorite of the Hunger Games series. I really mean this. When all the trailers and stuff came out, I saw the districts were getting destroyed, and Katniss, she was dealing with everything that happened in the first film, and everything was all coming down to her. I was like, this is interesting. Because The Hunger Games is one of those series that, like, by the first film I was somewhat underwhelmed by it, but I was intrigued enough that I'm willing to see where this story goes. And luckily, Catching Fire, it didn't just meet my expectations, it surpassed it. Catching Fire, it was one of my favorite films of 2013, and it was because it's one of those movies that came just out of left field, and I was surprised with how much I loved it. And I really mean this, because Catching Fire is what I call the Empire Strikes Back of this franchise. And I'm going to explain why I consider this like the Empire Strikes Back of this movie series. So the Hunger Games, it takes place sometime after the first movie, and Katniss, she is dealing with what I like to call Ellen Ripley syndrome from Aliens, otherwise PTSD. She's having post-traumatic stress from everything she did in the first movie, from the killing and trying to survive the Hunger Games. You know, she's out there hunting and killing animals, but she's seeing human beings, and she starts freaking out over it. Because beforehand, Katniss, she wasn't a killer, but now that she pretty much killed people, it kind of takes a toll on her. And I like that they went that direction with her, because, you know, it's actually a great story arc to deal with her for the sequel, and it's one of the more interesting parts of her character. Now, I totally forgot to mention this in my review of the first movie, but we also got Gale, who's played by Chris Hemsworth, aka Thor's little brother, Liam Hemsworth. Gale, he's known Katniss for some time. He's one of her best friends, but then, you know, once he saw her interacting with Peeta in the Hunger Games, you know, he starts player hating for a little bit. That's one of the things where I hope this series does not go, or they didn't, but is what I fear for this franchise. You know, it's just this whole love triangle between Gale, Katniss, and Peeta. And, you know, the last time we got a love triangle in a movie based on a YA novel, we got a gay-ass vampire and a shirtless werewolf. But with Gale, it also kind of takes a toll on him, because, you know, he's cared for Katniss for a long time, and to see her interacting with Peeta, but she's trying to explain to him that it was all for the cameras, but, you know, Gale's not really having it. And so later on, President Snow, he visits Katniss at her house, and he's pretty much sitting down with her at a table, pretty much. I don't believe that the love between you and Peeta was real. But President Snow, he's not convinced with the love between Peeta and Katniss. Well, he pretty much told Katniss, hey, you gotta prove to me on this tour that you and Peeta are real, because a revolution is rising. Your home district, 12, will be destroyed. So pretty much Katniss and Peeta, they have to put on for the cameras to really convince the world that they really are a thing, and convince the world that they're not one of them anymore, like they're us. So they go on the tour, and I like the interaction with Katniss and Peeta in the movie. Katniss and Peeta, the whole love between the two of them, it was all an act to put on for the cameras. And so when they're back home, they're not really talking to each other. And I even like that little scene with Peeta where he's like, alright Katniss, if we're going to be friends, you have to actually talk to me and not be stubborn or whatever. Like, what's your favorite color? And, you know, it's like that little interaction with them. They're trying to actually know each other and get acquainted with each other. But through all of this, they go on the tour. They go to District 11, where they pretty much have to give a speech to everybody saying, like, we're sorry for the fallen tributes, this, that, and the third, or whatever. District 11 is the home of Rue, who died in the first movie. And then Katniss, she speaks to the family of Rue, and she's all like, I'm sorry. Rue, she was so sweet and kind. And every time I pick flowers, I think of her. And then one of the old dudes in the crowd, he puts up 3 fingers and does the Mockingjay call. And then the soldiers, they're not having it, so I'm going to start a riot and shoot the guy. And that scares Katniss for a little bit, and then Hayman, she pretty much has to explain to her, there are no winners, there are survivors. Right now, you have to play as a distraction to everyone to convince people of the real things that are happening. And I like how they did that, because, you know, it's kind of a social commentary on how we perceive the media, and how sometimes we may get distracted by other things in the media when the media is trying to hide or possibly hide us or distract us from things that are happening in the world. And I just love the way how they play on that. So Katniss, she proceeds with the rest of the tour, doing what they intended for her to do, but then the districts, they're getting mad at her, but the revolution is starting to rise, and everyone's getting inspired by Katniss. There's this little girl, she said, when I go to the reaping, I want to volunteer. And that sets Katniss off for a little bit. She starts having nightmares, and then Peeta, he comes in. Katniss tells her it was a nightmare, and then Peeta's like, I did too. So Peeta's about to leave, and then Katniss is like, wait, can you stay with me? And so he gets in the bed with her, you know, just to comfort her and console her. And I like that, because it's like, you know, the two of them, they both went through some stuff together, and the two of them are the only people that understand each other. And that's what I like, because like Katniss, she's like, no, I want you to stay here with me, because you're the only person who understands me right now and understands what I'm going through right now. Then they find out that President Snow, he's not really getting convinced, so what do? They get married. So we go to that wedding ball, and we are introduced by Plutarch Heavensbee, who is played by the late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman. he's going to be the new game maker, taking over for Seneca Crane, who died in the first movie. And I just love that shot, President Snow, he's toasting to everybody, and then the fireworks go off, and then he sees Katniss, and Katniss sees him back, and then President Snow, he's like, it's just that look of disapproval, and it's like, I'm not convinced. And so Katniss and Peter, they all go back to their district, and the soldiers, they come in, they're pretty much taking over the district or whatever, and then someone is harassing someone, and then Gale comes in to the rescue, and then the soldiers, they start beating Gale, and I love this scene, because it's like, Katniss comes into his rescue, but she ends up getting beaten up, he goes in front of her, and then one of the generals, he threatens to kill her, and then Katniss is like, do it. And I like that, because it's pretty much Katniss saying, go ahead, shoot me, because, if you shoot me, then that'll set everyone off, and you don't want that, do you? And then Haymitch comes in, he comes into the rescue, they settle everything, and take Gale back to Katniss's house, and nurse him back to health, which also makes up for another scene that leads to the next morning between Katniss and Prim, because ultimately what this franchise is all because of Prim, because Katniss, she volunteered for Prim, and she pretty much explained to him, everything I do is all because of you and your mother. Then Prim explained to her, because you gave us something, hope. Because that's all Katniss is becoming now, a symbol of hope. And that does not sink in well with President Snow, and he does not like that, and so he's going to do everything in his power to pretty much contain it. And so later on, President Snow, he's meeting with Plutarch, and Plutarch pretty much explains to President Snow, the only way to convince the people that she's not one of them anymore, she's one of us, is if we get the surviving tributes in for the 75th Hunger Games, and that's the only way to get the people to hate her. And hell, maybe they'll hate her so much they'll end up killing her for her. And so Katniss and the other tributes in District 12, they all hear about this, and they're not happy about this, they're sad, and even at the reaping, it's like, when we see Effie, she goes in the girls' bowl, and she only has to pick up Katniss, and you can see the look on Katniss's face, and she's really scared, and that's how good of an actress Katniss is. And even on Elizabeth Banks, it's like, she's really ticked off about this or whatever. So we go to the men's bowl. Haymitch's name is picked up, but then Peter, he volunteers for him. Now at this point, we're about halfway through the movie, and that's one of the things I loved about this movie, because it's no longer about the games anymore. It's about the bigger picture, about this empire is controlling everyone, and that is finally coming to light, and everyone's starting to get the attention, and a revolution may be rising, but the evil empire, they're trying to contain it. And it's all because of one act of defiance, and could set everyone up and give people hope and be inspired. And because of that, everything is just getting thrown at Katniss left and right. And that's what makes this movie awesome, because it's like the events of the first movie takes a toll in this movie. And I just like it, because they did it so beautifully in this movie in a way that makes it understandable and made it work. So they go back to the Capitol, where we meet the other tributes. I just like it, when we're in that training facility, we meet Finnick. Now, at first, Finnick, he seems like a dick, but then as the movie goes on, you realize, he's pretty cool, and I'll further go more into that later. Then we also meet the female tribute with him, which is Max. She's all quiet, but then she's all calm, and she knows how the Hunger Games is, and I just love her character. Old ladies, they're always cool. Then we got Jeffrey Wright and Amanda Plummer, aka Honey Bunny from Pulp Fiction, or as they call them, Nuts and Bolts, because Jeffrey Wright, he's the tech guy, and then Amanda Plummer's character, she's a little cuckoo, but she knows the games as well, and they're great friends to Katniss, and they could be great assets to them. Then we got Joanna, who's played by Jenna Malone, and I loved her as well, because she's one of those girls that are she's been through the games before, and she even illustrated that with the show with Season, where it's like, we did what you wanted us to do, we've been through the games and we won, and now you want to put us back in the games? Well, then you got that one female tribute where she got the sharp teeth, and I remember when I saw that, I was like, but again, we also see Caesar again, played once again by Stanley Tucci. I love him in these movies. But we see Katniss, she has that dress that bursts into flames again, but then this time she twists around and it turns into a mockingjay. And even Caesar, he's like, he doesn't want to say the word. He's like, what is that? It is and then Katniss, she's like, a mockingjay? And it was made by Cinna. And then Peter, he goes on, he has his interview with Caesar, but then he reveals, or he lies and says that Katniss is pregnant, but then that sets the audience off, and even Caesar, he's like, well, already cut to commercial break. And then all the other tributes, they go behind them, they are holding hands, and they're all like, and so Haymitch tries to see if that gets them out of the games, but apparently it doesn't. And then another quick scene that I also love is with Effie, she's with Haymitch, Katniss, and Peter, and she gives the boys, this gold piece for them to wear, And then, it's like, you two have been through so much and deserve so much better. I just like that scene, because Elizabeth Banks plays it so well, because it's like it gives Effie some humanity. Saying that she knows what it is and she's not happy with the fact that they have to go back, and she's finally coming into terms of what's really happening in the overall bigger picture. So now we finally go to the day of the actual Hunger Games. But beforehand, Senna, he gives her the Mockingjay pin again and hides it, and he's like, I'm still betting on you, girl, Fire. And so Katniss, she goes in that little elevator thingy, and before she goes up, the soldiers, they come in and they start beating him to death, and then Katniss, she's like, no! And when I saw this movie for the first time, was like, no! But it was a pretty smart way to do it, because, they're trying to pretty much, it's a little psychological warfare for her, so that when she goes up, she's not all focused or not. It takes her off. She's on the edge when she finally goes up to the game. And so the game starts, and then we see Finnick. He also has that gold piece that was given to Peeta and Haymitch by Effie. Finnick, he gets Mags, and he forms an alliance with Katniss and Peeta. Now, I will say, I do like this game the second time around, because, the action is a little better than the first movie. The camera work is framed right. There's no more shaky cam like there was in the first movie. And I feel like the stakes are higher because it's in a more exotic arena. There's this platform in the middle of the ocean, and they all have to get to it, but then they're in the woods, and it's pretty much a dome. They go into the woods, and they encounter monkeys, these birds that make a lot of noises. If they go too far, the force field will pretty much shock them back, just like they did for Peeta. There's waterfalls of blood. There's waterfalls of the ocean. And the most dangerous thing, in my opinion, in this whole arena is the poison gas. And I just like that scene, but it's also terrifying, because it's like, it's the middle of the night, they're all sleeping, and then the poison gas, it just comes out of nowhere. Katniss, she tries to put her hand in to see what it is, and she's like, ah! And their body parts are all effed up, and so they all have to run from it. But long story short, Mags ends up taking it for them so that they can go, because, let's all face it, Mags, she wasn't going to survive the games anyway, and she wasn't going to win. And she was ultimately holding Finnick, Katniss, and Peeta back. So she sacrificed herself so that they could live. And they all figure out that this whole circle dome or whatever is just a clock, in that every hour something happens. The monkeys happens at this time. The poison gas happens at this time. The ocean waves happen at this time. The big waves of blood happens at this time, and so and so. And every time a new hour starts, a lightning bolt comes in at this tree. And so they all work together to devise a plan to pretty much stop. And before all this happens, Peeta and Katniss, they ultimately get more reacquainted. They really start to fall more in love with each other. Long story short, some of the other tributes that were against them, they come in and ambush them, but they all get separated. Joanna and Peeta, they get captured, but then Katniss, she goes back to the side. Jeffrey Wright, he's all wounded and defeated on the ground, and then Finnick, he comes to her. One of my favorite lines from this movie is, remember who the real enemy is, because Katniss, she's getting ready to shoot him, and then President Snow, he's at the Game Maker's place saying, come on, do it, just shoot him, because he wants her to really kill and become one of them. But then Katniss, she comes to her senses, and then she shoots the top of the dome, and then it just shocks that whole area, and then everyone is down. And then the jet comes in, picks her up. And then comes the plot twist of the whole movie. When Katniss, she wakes up, like, Jeffrey Wright, he's on the ground with this inhaler thing or whatever. She's on the jet, she comes in, and she sees both Haymitch, Finnick, and Plutarch at the same time. Because Haymitch, he was supposed to save Peeta, but he didn't. And so that sets Katniss off, and she starts to attack them, but she doesn't. And she's wondering why Plutarch is there. Well, that is because Plutarch, Haymitch, and Finnick, they're all working together to rebel against President Snow and the Capitol. And half the tributes were in on it too. And that this is the revolution, and that Katniss is the Mockingjay. So therefore, Plutarch, he was like a double agent working on the inside with President Snow and trying to pretty much make sure that Katniss, she gets into the game so that, pretty much sets up everything for the next one. Which does raises a couple of questions, and shout out to another movie reviewer, Jeremy Johnson, for putting these on in his spoiler review for this movie. Is that, so, Plutarch, he was the game maker for this whole game, so at every hour in the dome when everything happened, like the poison gas and the monkeys or whatever, those were pretty much situations where Katniss, she really could have died from those situations. So Plutarch, you would think he would be like, all right, we need to stop before she, okay. Like, I don't know, he was like, Plutarch, when all that stuff was happening, he was like, I think I'm going to get promoted, but Katniss, she maybe did. President Snow, he finds out about all this, and now he is just like, what, screw this, destroy District 12. And so we get that scene where Katniss, she's in District 13, mentioned by Plutarch, where he said we are on the way to District 13. Because like I said in the first movie, District 13, it got blown up and now it's destroyed. And it's just a wasteland. But President Snow orders for District 12 to be destroyed, but Gale got Prim and Katniss's mother out of there before District 12 got destroyed. And Gale pretty much explains to him, like, we got him out before the bombs came. And then Katniss is like, what, they're out of 12? And then Gale's like, there is no District 12. It's destroyed. And then I just love how the movie ends, which just with that last shot of her, she's all upset and she's mad that District 12 is gone. And then she shifts to this look on her face like, I just love how it ended that way, because it's like, oh, Katniss, she is mad and she is about to rain hell. And then we cut to the Mockingjay pen. It starts shifting from how it looked in the first book, and then how it looks in this book, and how it looks in the final book, which is Mockingjay. But I also love this ending because it's like, it was said what was going to happen in the ending in the beginning of the movie when President Snow, he was explaining to Katniss, all right, you need to do this, that, and the third, so that we can be convinced, so that this revolution will not come. And then he said that if you don't, well, District 12, it could be destroyed. So he pretty much told us the ending before it even happened. And District 12 was destroyed in the end. Guys, in the end, I absolutely loved Catching Fire. To me, Catching Fire is the best example of what a sequel should be. Everything that happened in the first movie is now taking its toll in this movie, and everything's all darker now, and then there's bigger consequences, and not everything was resolved. And there's more character arcs, and the characters are more expanded, and they expanded upon the bigger picture of this franchise, which is not just about the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games was just a tool to tell the story about this society that is being controlled by the Capitol, and that revolution needs to rise so that they can overcome all this. And to me, that credit goes to Francis Lawrence, who directed this movie as well as the next two movies. And I highly applaud him for that, because it's like, because the first movie, it was really just all about the Hunger Games. It wasn't until Francis Lawrence, he got his hands on these movies and was able to turn a franchise that was pretty much one-sided and expanded upon the bigger picture of why the Hunger Games are happening. And maybe it's explained more in the books or whatever. Maybe that's how they intended, because it was in the books. But I don't care, because Francis Lawrence, he was able to turn this franchise around and make it more respectable. Francis Lawrence, he's pretty much saying, no, movies based on young adult novels are not shit. I cannot stress how much I love this movie, because to me, Catching Fire is the best of the series, or at least maybe until we see what Mockingjay Part 2 is like. But I will still say that to me, Catching Fire is the best example of what a sequel should be, and it is one of the best sequels that I have seen in the past 10 years, and let alone the 2010s. And The Hunger Games Catching Fire definitely gets an A++. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and again, once a month I'm going to review every single Hunger Games movie leading up to Mockingjay Part 2, so I got one more left, which is Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. I'm going to review that next month in November, and so finally leading up to Mockingjay Part 2. And I cannot wait, like, we're really this close to Mockingjay Part 2, and I can't wait to see how they wrap this series up. Also, this month, be on the lookout for my review of Rocky V and Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. That's it for the day. If you like what you see, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my other channel. The links are in the description below. And be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram, Periscope, and Movie Pilot. Peace.